do that. All right. So this is the slide that where you check whether you're in the right workshop. Today we're talking about the Local Government System Improvements Amendment Bill, and it's quite a bitsy sort of bill. There are a lot of parts to this, and we'll go through each of those in a sort of a reasonable amount of detail as we go. So I thought it might make sense for questions, comments, any sorts of clarification and discussion to happen section by section. So I'll make sure I pause at the end of each section so that you've got a chance to think about those. There's not much benefit in thinking about it in the round because the proposals are all quite discrete. There are a few of them too. So we'll kick off. So, just set the scene. A lot of the changes we're talking about today, you will be familiar with if you happen to be at the 2024 LGNZ conference, or you saw that presentation or read that speech. It's a wee while ago now, but it really is the starting point for a lot of this material. From a very high level, you'll see that the parliamentary website summary gives us a pretty clear sense of what we're doing here. The primary policy objective is to reduce pressure on council rates. And then there's the pieces of the change proposals that I mentioned listed, refocusing the purpose of local government, better measuring and publicising council performance. There's the new or returned definition of core services. There's a section on strengthening council's accountability and transparency. And there's a whole list of things which are captured under the heading of regulatory relief. Just a bit more on today's workshop. I said I'd go through the sections of the bill. I thought it might be useful just to have a slide on what's not in the bill as well. Then we'll go through those sections. And then I've just got a few comments on the last slide about considerations about whether we submit as ORC, what we submit on, how that process works. So right at the end, we can have a discussion about that. So we'll start with what's not in the bill. Just in case you thought this was the big one, there are no proposals relating to structural change or any of the thinking about the role of different types of councils or unitary councils or similar. There's no rate cap in and of itself, but there is mention in the explanatory note of a rate cap. So we'll come back to that at the relevant point. But this is not introducing a rate cap. There are also no changes to LTP provisions or audit requirements, and that's relevant because those sorts of changes have been mentioned in the same context of some of the changes that are happening, but they're not in this bill. Any discussion about that content before we move on? No, I'm just making sure I can see people before I carry on. All right, there we go. So we'll start with this section on the purpose of local government. So you know what we're talking about. We've got the current purpose there, and you'll be aware that that included 4 well-beings. It also includes a sentence that is retained to enable democratic local decision-making and action by and on behalf of local communities. That's still there. Those 4 well-beings, social, economic, environmental and cultural well-being, are replaced with clause B down there. And you'll note in the heading that I've got a new purpose in scare quotes because it's not new. This is very similar to a previous purpose statement from an earlier version of the Local Government Act, clause B, that is. Clause C is new and introduces a requirement to support local economic growth and development by doing all of that content in B. The other leg to this new purpose is, I do need to mention also that when you remove those 4 well-beings, there are other places where that needs to come out. So it changes the definition of community outcomes, changes the definition of significance elsewhere in the bill, changes the definition of, or changes the principles relating to local authorities in section 14 and some of the financial management considerations. So in all of those instances, you were previously asked to take account of the 4 well-beings, and you're now asked to consider the new purpose or local interests or other more generic terms. Now we get to the new clause that follows that purpose. So this is a new clause proposed. Again, we've got it in course, we've got it in scare quotes because there has been a version of this before. The language has been updated, but we now have a core services definition. So following that purpose, the new clause 11A will be that core services are to be considered in performing the role of local government. And there's a list of 5 core services there: network infrastructure, public transport services, waste management, civil defence and emergency management, and libraries, museums, reserves, and other recreational facilities, which does capture quite a lot, especially that last one. This again is very similar to the previous version. A change, for example, is that item D was previously something, more generic about natural disasters, and now refers to civil defence emergency management so that it can connect with the Civil Defence and Emergency Management Act. But otherwise, that content is very similar to how it was before. In part 2 of this new clause, the local authority must have particular regard to the contribution that core services makes to its community. And that phrase particular regard is not defined, so will need to be interpreted. It's here that that rates capping is mentioned in the explanatory bill. So it doesn't say anything like, rates capping will apply in this way relative to core services. It's simply the section that talks about a new core services definition also says, are we considering rates capping? And it specifically says such as that used in New South Wales. So it's foreshadowing discussions to come, but nothing direct. I'll pause there because that's the section on the new purpose and core services definition. So if there are any comments or questions about that would be that you'd like to raise, now's a good time to do it.
Can I be a parent? Shouldn't it be purposes if there's more than one?
Probably.
Well, no, it should have always been that, and it's just because it's whether it is, yeah, and performing performing the role in 11A, is the role defined somewhere to be only providing that's in 2. I'm trying to link the purpose to performing the role.
They do follow one another. So I guess they're linked in that regard. But you're right, the language is slightly different. Should we go to the hands up? So, Councillor Meffam.
Yeah, just in terms of the role of the ORC, I mean, obviously network infrastructure, public transport and civil defence emergency management all sort of fits. But just in terms of environmental management, are we seeing, is this where it's going to impact us the most, do you think? Or how's it going to, what's going to change here?
It's not a direct answer to your question, but I think that ORC's roles are clearer in this purpose statement. So the performance of regulatory functions is clearly a core role for ORC, those regulatory functions that relate to environmental legislation. But you're right, there is not a lot of ORC in this core services definition. Amanda or Richard may have some thoughts on that too.
Richard, are you going? I'm happy to make a comment. Yeah, so I think this is the purpose under the Local Government Act. I think a number of our functions, the purpose is embedded in other legislation. So from a transport perspective, you've got the Land Transport Act. From a Civil Defence and Emergency Management Act, our CDM responsibilities there in the Civil Defence and Emergency Act. The environmental responsibilities largely stem from the Resource Management Act, and I know that is under reform as well. So I think this is, this is one part of our purpose, but regional councils have always been a little bit different to to territorial authorities, and that we've got a number of, like the Biosecurity Act is another big one that that requires the regional pest management plan and the annual operation plans. So there's a whole lot of functions we have coming from, and I know public transport's mentioned there, but I think there's a whole lot of other functions that mean that continue to give a mandate for our role beyond this.
Thanks.
Councillor Somerville.
Thanks. This does relate to Tim's question too, and it's probably impossible to answer actually, but ask it anyway. In terms of, right, these are the core services. But, and Amanda has noted for a regional council, there's a whole lot of other legislation that tells us services. But this isn't saying you can't do anything else. You know, we're not excluding this. There's no specific exclusion of things that aren't listed here. Or, is that right?
That is correct. And there have been discussions recently with councils being asked to think about what proportion of their work falls under this definition. And it wouldn't be 100% for any of them. I do suspect that for territorial authorities, it would be a greater percentage than for regional councils though. But it's, yes, certainly councils are performing functions outside of this, these definitions. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
All right, we can carry on to the next section, which I've titled benchmarking because that's a lot of that's the sort of headline that at least the minister's speech used for this sort of work. But essentially this is, for this sort of content, it's essentially about new performance measures. And I do apologise that the language here is a wee bit convoluted when we talk about what those might be, because it's not what you'll see when we get to it. But also I've got some information about how these new performance measures are going to be used and shared by the government in a centralised way. So this is the part that I'm afraid is a wee bit more convoluted than we would like. The performance measures themselves are not in this bill, but there's a new there's a proposal that that new regulations can be made to set up parameters or benchmarks, and there's a whole list of things there in, wait for it, 259 DC1, prudently managing revenues, expenses, assets, liabilities, investments, and general financial dealings, and then specified activities or groups of activities. And then you'll see that those groups of activities we can also set up, or the minister will be able to make regulations for groups of activities to be included in the long-term plan, annual plan, and annual reports. So again, dictating what will happen there, and then a new requirement for prescribed processes, timeframes, and other matters for accessing those new performance measures. So the upshot of all of that, which I agree is quite broad, but it does suggest a new power. This one's more specific, sorry, is that there will also be a requirement to report on consultants and contractor expenditure. So that's a bit of a counterpoint to earlier. That is a specific request. But the upshot of that earlier regulatory power to pull together new measures is a new national reporting. So I've gone through this a wee bit here. This is from the explanatory note that, again, using New South Wales as an example, the government tends to establish council performance measurement framework. They have, in fact, hopefully you saw it last month, released a first iteration of this. And that speech back in 2024 did commit to releasing this first set of information prior to the election. So that's happened. That information was obtained from existing council reports. So rather than using that those new regulations that are proposed, and as such, it focuses on financial performance rather than any broader set. But the DIA's website advises that subsequent releases will cover financial performance, asset management, service delivery, and governance. So I thought I'd just show you a bit of what that looks like. So you can see this is the first release that DIA has set out for the public to review prior to the election. That's the first half, demographics, rates, revenue, debt for ORC, and the second half of the same page, OPEX, personnel, CapEx, and a measure of balanced budget for the last 3 years. I thought it might be useful also to have a quick look at what this looks like in New South Wales. So this is presumably where we're heading in some respect. I've just picked a small council in North Sydney because it happens to be where my aunt and uncle live, and I thought I would have a quick look, but it is just an example for Ku-ring-gai. You can see along the top there a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 headings. So there's quite a lot of information for each council here. This is just the top of the page on assets. I've picked another measure here with rates and charges. So there's a bit of information there about change over time for rates and charges. And the third, council expenditure, and then comparing that to state averages. So we can assume that there'll be something of this nature as an end point for those new regulations, the new performance measures. And again, that's the end of that section. So Councillor Wilson, go ahead.
Sorry, I can't get into diligence, so I haven't got the slides. But earlier on, Marianne, sorry, I'm going to go back. You said the purpose was a regulatory, and yet I couldn't see any words in the purpose that took me to that point. I appreciate that our job is to monitor and to ensure that the environment is good under the RMA, but I'm not quite sure that it's just talks about a regulatory. And I just wanted to understand where you were coming from in the purpose on talking about regulatory.
Oh, that's the third clause in that in the sentence on in the purpose statement. I can flick back.
I'm sorry.
Although
I'll go and look at it. So I just couldn't. Yeah, there was quite a lot of information in the box, and Diligence is telling me to give me a new password, but it doesn't tell me what I have to put in to get a password. As in, I keep on putting new ones in, but they don't fit. So I will. Okay, thank you.
all good. Any other thoughts on performance measurement, benchmarking, and so on, and this element here, or where it's heading, perhaps?
I had a look at that report the other day, actually, in regards to the media, the average ORC, and it actually looks like quite an informative report. There's nothing to be concerned about with that. So yeah, it looks good to me.
Okay. Gretchen, you're popping up, but maybe that's.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just you don't need the details, so I didn't realise I wasn't muted. Sorry.
No, you're right. You just had a green box about you. As can happen. Okay, let's head to the next section. Bear with me. This part's about governance, so you'll be following along. This is about so some fairly discrete changes here, and they do relate to public discourse and public debate, but they're not really connected to one another as much. So we start with a couple of new governance principles. These are added to an existing list of governance principles in section 39. So you'll see there's already a section 39A through E, and there's going to be a new F, which states that a local authority should foster the free exchange of information and expression of opinion for elected members, and then a second new clause, which is that a local authority should foster elected members' collaborative work. And then it specifies to set the local authority's agenda, determine policy, and make decisions. So, I mean, you'll be aware of some of the public discourse and the origins of those statements. There's not a lot covered in the bill itself as to the motivations for these changes. And the bill does, however, have another clause which states that it's each council's local governance statement that needs to set out exactly how the council will operationalise these two changes. So that's those two. The next are also going to be of interest. The The bill will introduces a power for the Secretary of the DIA to release a standardized code of conduct and a standardized set of standing orders that all councils will need to use. So there won't be an opportunity to set those at the start of the triennium, as is the case now. It's understood, and this is really drawn from other other organisations' draft submissions, that Standards New Zealand will prepare those documents on DIA's behalf. And the last in this set of changes is that there is a new requirement for a member of a local authority to have access to documents that are reasonably necessary for them to effectively perform their duties. And operationalising that, it states in a separate clause, is the job of the council chief executive. So that's the suite of changes that relate to governance. And once again, I'll pause. Do we want to focus a bit on some of those? Councillor Ware.
Yeah, just on that first slide on the governance stuff, with the two new principles. So obviously it's up to the local government statement to operationalise that, but how are we expecting this to be operationalised? Is something similar been done in New South Wales for this specific thing as well? Or?
I don't think Sydney can help us for this one. I'm not familiar with the local governance statement, so I might defer to Amanda on that one. There will have been one last triennium, no doubt.
Yeah, so currently our local governance statement is it's on our website, and it's a collection of documents that are sort of a pre-existing policy, so all brought together. So this hasn't come to council as a governance statement per se, because it's all drawn from existing, like delegations manual, all the information that's required. So we will need to, we'll need to prepare a statement on this, and add that into that governance statement online, so that will be available. And I guess we'll just have to work through what that how we do that.
But we don't have any sort of ideas currently on what that looks like in terms of, I don't know, like how you mandate that elected members work collaboratively or anything like that.
Yeah, I think the code of, there's a couple of things there. One, the code of conduct currently talks about working together and principles of working together. I think at the post elections, when the chair is appointed, there's been in previous trainings discussions around getting together as a council and working those things through. But as we know, you can't force people to come to we can't force people to be at the table. That will need to be worked through what that looks like.
Yeah. Okay. I guess my final question there is kind of a pointed one, but does this do anything?
I think it probably, and like I say, the code of conduct already talks about some of these principles in terms of working together. I think they're part of that will be up to elected members. Some councils have a charter that sits at the front of their council agendas. There's various things, mechanisms that could be put in place to support that, but it will be, elected members will need to have a say in that. As staff, we can't design that for you.
I think it is relevant that these changes are being brought together, though. While this says that the operationalising these changes is a job of the local governance statement, that the code of conduct and the standing orders that are presented for council's use would have to be consistent with this. That they can't give us one set of requirements on the one side and then an inconsistent set on the other side. So there's the explanatory note for those two documents does suggest they will be, to require more accountability, that they're set out for increased accountability for local elected members. So, but how exactly that happens and what impact it has are of course much harder to determine or predict. Councillor Metham.
Yeah, just on the code of conduct again. It sort of lacks teeth in terms of punitive measures. Is there any change likely in that area in terms of perhaps it having a little bit more teeth than it currently has?
Not in the bill itself, and I can just go to those clauses, doesn't give any information about what would be in the code of conduct. It's certainly true that some of the proposals put forward by some of the sector bodies, Tautura, LGNZ and others, have suggested that, that independent arbiters and others could be involved in this sort of process. And so by continuing with a code of conduct that is administered by the council, they've essentially said that, there won't be a new process necessarily, but remains to be seen whether the code of conduct is new in some way that changes how those processes work or what their impact is on councillors or
so
impact
sort
on
of
all parties.
Yeah.
It's very much a wait and see, yeah.
Okay.
But the
Yeah,
overall
and if I could-
framework hasn't changed. Sorry, Megan.
I was just going to jump in to say, so the Local Government Commission a couple of years ago was tasked with reviewing codes of conduct. I'm just trying to think, I'm sure we've got the link to that report. And they talked about one of their recommendations was that to give it more teeth, you would actually need, set up sort of some sort of external body responsible for overseeing the codes of conduct and overseeing processes and a whole lot of other things. But the government at the time didn't look to pick up any of those recommendations due to, cost implications, because having an external agency brings a whole lot of other challenges to the table. So there is a report talking about that, but that, like Mariana said, that hasn't been raised in this context.
All right, we're moving through at a rapid pace, but any other points on the governance elements? Okay, we're by moving at a rapid pace, we're already at the other section. So
Sorry, you just jumped over that last slide. We hadn't had that before, had we?
yes, we had.
Sorry.
Yeah, this is there sort of there were 3 slides on governance. Yes.
So I was talking about this one here. Sorry.
All good. Okay, we'll carry on. So the other section, I'm afraid it's a bit of a long one, but some of these are very minor, as you'll appreciate when I go through them. The first one is that we no longer need to put public notices in the newspaper. So that's the thing. There is now no requirement for service delivery reviews. If you may be familiar with these, they're commonly referred to as Section 17A reviews. Councils were required to review the way they deliver services either individually or as a region every 6 years. So there's no requirement to do those now. I'm not especially familiar with Section 118 certificates, but that clearly relates to lending arrangements, so a financial mechanism. There's a change so that chief executives who are currently able to extend their appointment without going to market, they're currently able to extend for 2 years. They will be able to extend their appointment for a further 5 years to a total of 10 before that role needs to go to market. There is a change relating to development contributions for capital projects. They can now be targeted in a way that they weren't before, and then there's no longer a requirement to consider the relevance of tikanga Māori knowledge when appointing CCO directors. So a fairly narrow place for that one, but a change nonetheless. That's the complete list of the other section. So I will pause at the other section in case there's something here that you'd like to pick up. No.
Just to clarify, Mariana, that section 118
Yes.
does relate to the local government lending, and it was an issue that arose for us when Pim was interim, and it also arises if I'm away, and it creates just a bit of a legal headache. So it's just a tidy fix to ensure that interim or acting chief executives can sign those LGFA lending certificates. So there's not too much
okay.
in that one, other than it's a nice administrative fix for us.
Great. I didn't see LGFA in there anywhere, and that would have made it clearer for me. Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll leave those. I mentioned that I would just make a few points about a possible ORC submission.
Sorry,
Going back?
just going back, and Richard, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask this question. I know it's one you're through. The second term, does that mean that you don't have to advertise and that you can offer it for a second term of 5 years?
Yeah, that's what I understand. So at the moment you can
Yeah.
offer up to 2, whereas this would allow an offer up to 5 without advertising.
Okay, yeah, sorry. That's, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so it's just an extension of current 24 months out to 60 months. But
Yeah.
I haven't seen the detail either, to be fair, Kate. But I'm assuming it's up to. You don't have to extend it out to 5.
Yeah,
Just
yeah, no, and
gives you
that's, yeah, it's awkward asking you that. It's I'm interested in what's driving that, but I'm quite comfortable with it as well.
And it's purely administrative efficiency. That's what Simon Watts has said. That's one of the things that they believe drives some efficiency, is that saves recruitment processes for the sake of it. If councils are happy, that's as much as there is to it.
And at a third term, you have to advertise.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's great. Thank you.
All right, thanks, folks. So just a few points on submission. Submissions closed Wednesday, 27th of August, so we've still got a fortnight and a bit. There is a council meeting scheduled that day, so if it was your preference, or if there's a collective view amongst the senior leadership that the submission should come to council, it wouldn't hold us up. Just to note that this is obviously a system-focused amendment, so we know that LGNZ Taituara and Te Urukahika will all be providing quite fulsome submissions, and we don't have specific criteria, but about when we do and don't submit on behalf of ORC. But it's relevant to point out that these changes don't disproportionately impact Otago or ORC. We'd be making points as a local authority, but we haven't identified anything that we think would be a unique viewpoint at Otago, on behalf of Otago or on behalf of ORC. So yeah, invite comments on that. Councillor Malcolm.
Mariana, at what stage will we know what LGNZ and the other 3 are putting in, or we won't know that?
I'm not sure, actually. They have circulated drafts for those staff who are preparing submissions to sort of refer to, but I don't know what their policy is for sharing those more widely. But I could certainly follow up. I have seen drafts from at least Taituara and Te Urukahika. I'm not sure about LGNZ. Amanda may have up-to-date information on LGNZ's submission. So sorry, not a clear answer. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so Mariana, look, if we're members of LGNZ, we probably should understand what they're submitting, and that if they are submitting that's something that's contrary to what we sort of thought we should be submitting, we probably do have to do a submission.
That would certainly be something we can facilitate, circulate.
Yeah,
and
they may have done that, mightn't they? Look, they may have actually prepared this already and say, well, this is what we're submitting, and we might be we may be just submitting as in support to their submission, as opposed to anything negative. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we can certainly look into that as an approach. Councillor Weir?
Yeah, I was just sort of jumping onto what Kim was saying there, and agree that if on the other hand, if LGNZ and Te Urukahika do provide submissions that cover everything we would have wanted to say, I don't think there's any harm in us adding our own submission, even if it's basically got no content but just says that we do support the Te Urukahika one or the LGNZ one, or both. Just because I think an LGNZ submission does represent all of its members, but can be, you know, dismissed as just one. And so if we're keen to add a number there, we should do so.
Thank you. Yeah, that it is unfortunately the case that there's a bit of count. Sometimes submissions are counted in numeric terms, aren't they? So definitely take that point. Councillor Methven?
Yeah, just interested in the purpose of this is to reduce the pressure on council rates and prioritising core services. Are we able to get any kind of indication as to whether this bill will actually will achieve this purpose with the Otago Regional Council in terms of taking pressure off council rates?
I wonder how we would do that in a practical sense.
Well, it would be worth if we could, if there was a practical way of doing it, trying to see what the impact of the bill is. If this is its core purpose, how will it impact us? It's probably too hard to answer, but it's it would certainly be a good exercise as part of looking at this.
Yeah, and if I can jump in, I mean, there's some immediate impacts of, not having to advertise, like some of the low-level stuff, like not having to advertise in newspapers, as we talked about before, the CE recruitment stuff, the codes of conduct and standing orders less so. But so there are some immediate low-level.
That's nothing very significant at all, is it?
No, but it all counts, right?
Well, hundreds of dollars.
Well, thousands over a year. And
Okay.
CE recruitment, if in a couple of years, depending on where you got to, actually a CE recruitment process is a really expensive process.
There's probably more gains for them around the core services definition. So what sort of services do we provide the Otago Regional Council that would no longer be seen as a core service, and what would be the savings in withdrawing those core services?
Yeah, and that work hasn't. Oh, sorry, Mariana.
I was going to suggest that Councillor Wilson or Councillor Robertson might be wanting to make points in that regard. Is that the case? Oh, we can't hear you, Gretchen, sorry. No.
Perhaps I could make a comment on that, Mariana.
Sure.
I think that there's the work that we've asked Richard, and the work Richard is working on now, is assessing our work programs so we can make judgments on whether they're mandatory, whether they're assisting mandatory processes, or whether they're discretionary. That will now have another lens on them, saying, is that part of our core business? So I think that's, until we get to that state, it's simply giving us another lens that we have to put over the organisation's operation, which I actually think we're well down the track of doing that with the process where we've started to do in the last AP and looking for the next AP and the long-term plan. So it will just give that focus to, is that a core, apart from everything else we're doing, is that actually a core part of our business we should be doing, and that will give us the answers then. So, I think it's a very positive move, really.
I think, can you guys hear me now? Yeah,
we can.
Sorry, yep. Yeah, for me, it was the discussion before about whether or not that describes what a regional council's core business is. There was quite a lot of discussion about that at the national conference as well, and just it doesn't really capture regional councils at all. So whilst agreeing with Kevin, I think that would be the thing. So if you just strip back everything apart from what it says on paper there would be quite a lot of important stuff that we do that isn't captured there. And we talked about that just before. So that would probably, I'd imagine, be what Te Ura Kahika's submission might be round. What are some of the functions of regional councils that are important that aren't there? And if they really aren't there, then where are they? I guess in the past as well, I can remember the full wellbeings coming into the Local Government Act and how councils reacted at the time as well. Even how Otago Regional Council may have reacted at that time, and it was all new, and everyone thought, gosh, what's the point of having the full wellbeings? You know, that's quite a lot of extra work. Actually, it didn't make any difference whatsoever. Councils just did what they needed to do, and I honestly think that it's probably going to be quite similar, but if we're going to make an effective submission, it would be on this point. It doesn't really capture what regional councils do, and that might be deliberate.
Katie, go ahead.
Sorry, was that me?
It's you.
Sorry.
Yes,
So,
thank you, Councillor Wilson.
I'm ambivalent whether the well-beings and the expressed as well-beings are in there, but I think where they are very useful is as outcomes. And I think that's where they haven't been used well as a measurement. And at so many levels, we measure things in economics. We report on economics. We do not report on social or environmental or cultural outcomes. Are they important? Very. And I think that's where the misalignment actually is. So I'm ambivalent for them to go out, but I think, and I certainly think that core business shouldn't just be regulatory. I think that's what we should be focusing on as the most effective way to get results in a community. And to my mind, after 6 years on this council, us writing plans isn't the way to go necessarily. You know, it's one part of a much bigger way of getting results. So I think we have to be really careful that we don't, and that's why I asked the question about regulatory before, is that we don't put everything into mandatory and discretionary, but we look at the outcomes that we are going to deliver in any and every which way that we can. So long way of saying I don't care about them well-being so much as outcomes and how they're measured.
Thank you. Any other point? I'm sorry, we just don't have answers to these questions, but I do think that what Amanda was talking about earlier with all of the other legislation is really is the missing piece of the puzzle, that where we're not covered under the Local Government Act, we are covered under a whole range of related legislation. The problem, of course, is that this is being presented as the purpose for local government, and that's where it is. I agree, I find that confusing too. You expect that the purpose for local government to be comprehensive, and it's clearly not. I do admit that I went down a small conspiratorial rabbit hole thinking that perhaps this was a new set of core services that didn't cover regional councils for a reason, but it is the case, just to remind you, that this was the core services definition brought back from a previous version of the Local Government Act. So yes, that rabbit hole, we can probably pop up from there, at least in part.
If we want to go down being conspiratorial, caring about having a regional council, I think the form will follow the function. And what we have to, do we need to have, sorry, I think the difficulty for us at the moment is with RMA reform and no idea of what that looks like, it is hard to see the full function. You know, I'm really happy to enter that debate and discussion at any stage. I think we could make some really good constructive discussion comments to them on RMA reform, and especially in catchment planning and catchment action plans in a non-regulatory sense. And there's huge capacity and potential there. But I think you're going to say this is not the time to do that.
think I would struggle to weave it into a submission on these exact clauses. That is probably true.
Well,
but
the problem is they're
I'm not
not
saying
asking
it's
the
not
right-
related.
They didn't ask us the right questions 2 weeks ago, and they're not asking the right questions under this. And this is the frustration: is that we're not leading the charge. Good governance would be that we would lead the charge on what the function is going forward, and no one's putting it up as a discussion point. And we all in local government New Zealand are bereft because we're not functionally getting together and doing that ourselves. We deserve to get what we're foisted on us if we don't enter into that discussion. I'm up for it.
All right.
Mariana, do you need us to give you a steer on whether we would like to bring a paper around getting it a submission, or?
Well, I mean, I do have a bit of a steer, sort of the start of a steer, if you will. That I am happy to follow up whether it's okay to circulate the LGNZ and perhaps Te Urukahika submissions, or at least circulate the key points in those documents. And it has been suggested earlier that we could assess, perhaps by round robin email or as a role for the submissions working group, whether or not those submissions align, mostly with the discussion today, or once people have read them, whether they match the points that those reading them wish to say. So we could either, and then we have two options, presumably, that either we just endorse those submissions as written in a very simple form, or present some additional counterpoints once they've been read. I haven't heard a whole range of feedback today that I would use to start a bespoke ORC response. I think we've mostly been trying to make sense of the content, which is entirely understandable. Does that sound like a reasonable way forward? And should we go with do you want to nominate the submissions working group as a group, or should I do that with Amanda and Richard's support to all councillors?
Alexa's just got her hand up, and then we might round it off. Yeah.
I just wanted to throw something into that, because I really think that there's not a lot for us to do here until we see what the other submissions are, those two submissions, and I would like to see them just circulated to us. I share everyone's concerns, particularly I was going to ask a question that Tim raised earlier about where the environmental functions are and where ORC sits in this, because it's not there. And I don't know what they're playing at with that, but I should imagine that the other two organisations will comment on that. I don't know if there's any chance of, I can't imagine that they won't. So I think it's probably a risk worth taking. And if it's something that's been omitted intentionally, it's probably not worth us submitting on anyway. I don't know. I think it seems like a lot of time and effort could go into this, when probably LGNZ and Te Urukahika and Taituara should be able to cover, I would have thought.
Sounds like we're all agreeing with the approach that you're taking, Mariana, and those were good comments earlier as well, reminding us, and ministers actually did say that too at the local government conference, that the other legislation isn't taken away and we still have to perform our functions under them, like civil defence, for example, which isn't specifically listed there, but all the other ones as well, like what Alexa's just said. So it doesn't strip that off us, but we don't know what the future will look like. But yep, like your suggestion of having a look at the other submissions, you've got a little bit of a steer today. Personally, I think the submissions steering group captures a good sector of councillors, and that's the job that they perform really well. So I'd be really happy for it to go through there. If others have other views, though, then they're welcome to jump in. But yep. Councillor Somerville does. Yep.
Yes, I'm happy for the steering group to take on that role, but would be very good if those submissions, if possible, or the summaries can be submitted to everyone, and then anyone who's not on that group can feed into the steering group.
Great idea. Yep.
Same with me.
Awesome.
I'll
Sounds
get rid
like
of
we're
this.
done. Mariana. Oh, sorry, someone was talking. Yep.
No, that was me. I just wanted to
Oh,
clear
yep, great.
the decks so we could
Yep.
round things off. All right. No, I don't want to interrupt your closing comments, Gretchen. Feel free to continue. I was just wanting to take away the screen so that we were talking to one another and not.
I was just about
Not
to hand
that
back
final
to you,
random slide.
Mariana, so go for it.
Okay. Thank you all. That all sounds good. I have clear direction. I will go back. I've got a bit of extra time thanks to our early start, so I can go to LGNZ and to Urukaka today and find out exactly how they want me to approach this, and fingers crossed they are happy for us to make use of that material, and we'll take things from here. I'll be in touch within the next few days so that we've got a bit of time, but we are well in time for the 27th, so we should be okay to proceed from here. Any other comments from anyone else? No.
Just say thanks for your work, Mariana. It's really great.
Not a problem.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Thank you very much. A great workshop. Thanks, heaps.
Thanks, folks. See you later.
Thank you, Jay.
Thanks, Mariana. Thanks, everyone.